Okay, so we are ready to grid the large piece of paper so we can start drawing. I'm gonna first show you what it should look like when it's all finished. So this is the goal. Every square looks exactly the same. They're exactly 1 inch increments all the way around, okay? That's what we want. What you're going to need is a pencil, nice and sharpened, or a mechanical pencil, and a ruler. It doesn't matter what kind of ruler you have, even if it's the small ones from your assignment notebooks, just as long as you have something that gives you 1 inch increments, okay? Be careful of your ruler. Some of them have this, there you go. Some of them have this gap right here between the edge of the ruler and 0. So make sure you accommodate for that. I'm going to make sure that my paper is lined up with this line right here, okay? So let's get started. Line that up. And I'm going to make little tick marks all the way down. And when I get to the number 12 here, I have to take my ruler, line it back up. So I'm lining it up like this so that the 1 and the 2, those dashes are lined up again. And I'm making sure that I'm not accidentally making that space smaller or bigger than it should be. All the way down. All right, so, and I wanna show you guys something. Right here on the edge, what I just finished, notice how there's a little space. There's about 4 millimeters left. That's okay, that's totally normal. You just have to make sure that as you measure the rest of your paper, that this gap is the same at the top and at the bottom. So the next step is to measure the bottom of your piece of paper. Let me see if you can see that in the camera. You can, okay. You're gonna measure the bottom of your piece of paper, start in the same spot and work your way all the way to the end, and you should have the same gap there, okay? If you find it easier to flip your paper over, that's fine. However, notice that the gap is now on this side, okay? So you're gonna have to start measuring from the opposite side. Tick marks all the way across. Feel free to pause whenever you need to. Just make sure you are hearing some of these little suggestions and things to make sure this is accurate. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. See the gap? It's on the same side of the paper. So this is done correctly, okay? Next step is to draw lines all the way across. Now, my ruler is not long enough to reach all the way across. So I'm guessing yours is not either. So look for a straight edge in your house, anything that's really, really straight. So that could mean your folder, even if your folder is nice and straight. If you have one of the ripped up looking folders that are a little beat up, you might have to look for something else in your house. Maybe ask somebody in your house if you have a like a yardstick or one of those really large 90-degree angle rulers that contractors have, maybe that you have it in your garage somewhere. Get creative. Anything that is really straight and will give you a nice long straight line will work, okay? So yeah, I'm gonna use the folder. That'll be my example. Okay, so I'm gonna take my folder and I'm going to, I find it easier if you're a righty to start on the right side of the paper. I find that drawing those lines goes a little bit easier. So I'm lining up my folder with those dashes. Okay, and then very lightly draw in the line. Please do not draw too dark. You're going to have a lot of erasing to do at the end of this project if you're drawing too dark. Those lines will show. So look how I'm holding my pencil. I'm like barely hanging on to it. I'm not doing this. I'm like very loosely holding it at the top. So I am not applying a whole lot of pressure. So if you're, the space that you're working on, if it's a really small area and you feel like you need to work on the floor, that's fine. Remember, you can always pause this video or put your Chromebook on the floor with you while you work. find a comfortable space. You just have to really make sure you have enough space so that you're lining up these dashes perfectly. If you're off by more than 1 millimeter, it will mess up your portrait a little bit. Like that little area then won't be proportional. So take your time. So I'm gonna keep recording while I do this. Again, feel free to fast forward or pause. I'm going to switch to my long ruler just because it's going to be faster for the sake of the video. But you can do this entire thing with your folder if you need to, or whatever straight edge you're able to find. I'm going to finish this, but I'm not really going to add any additional comments. So you can fast forward if you are working faster than I am, or you can pause if you are working more slowly. A few more. Okay. The next set of lines is a lot more challenging. My ruler happens to be long enough to reach all the way across, but if you're using a smaller ruler or if you're using your folder to measure all the way across, my fear is that it might be a little bit crooked and it might be harder to line these up. So when I start measuring, I actually like to measure in multiple different areas. Let me switch back to my small ruler, just a little bit easier. So I'm going to flip the paper this way, line up my ruler, and mark 1 inch all the way across again. Okay, line it up, mark 1 inch across all the way. And then I find one of these lines in the middle. It doesn't matter which one, just something near the middle. And I'm going to measure there as well, like this. 1 inch increments all the way across. Make sure you're starting on the same side. So if there's any gaps at the end, they're going to line up. And then I'm going to measure the very bottom. You can't see the very bottom, so I'm going to flip it. If you're flipping your paper, don't forget, if you have a little bit of a gap, so I have like a teeny tiny gap on this side, like 1 millimeter, you just have to make sure that you keep that gap on the same side of the paper. So I'm gonna have to start measuring on this side since I flipped the paper over. I would say that's the most common mistake students make with this part of the project, is flipping the paper over and then not realizing that the lines do not match up. Okay. One quick note, this paper happens to be really straight. You might find that your gap is a little bit bigger than what I have, or you might find that the gap is smaller here but gradually gets bigger towards the bottom. That's probably because I cut the paper crooked. These were enormous pieces of paper that I had to cut down. So don't freak out about that. As long as everything lines up on the opposite side, it should be fine. All right, now I gotta line these up. I gave myself multiple measurements, so now even a short ruler like this can reach these two dashes. Line them up. And then I'm also able to reach from where I left off to the other dash over here. So this way I'm making absolutely certain that it's perfectly straight. There's no guessing, there's no eyeballing. Please do not try to eyeball any of these lines. Your eyes are wrong. They play tricks on you. Your eyes make things look crooked when they're really not. Do not trust your eyes. If you feel like your grid is looking crooked, just stop and use your ruler to measure and see if everything is still at 1 inch. I bet you that it is, and it's just an odd kind of optical illusion that your eyes make parallel lines that are close together. Your eyes make them look kind of like they're crooked. Okay, so you would just do this all the way across until you have a full grid. So I'm going to take out the one that's finished until you have something like this, all gridded. And the last step is just to make sure you have the right number of squares. So this is the picture I'll be drawing. This is Mr. B. And if I count across 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Good. Here I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Awesome. You should have 15 that way. And then count the opposite way. If for some reason your picture was not edited correctly, and maybe your picture is just a little bit smaller than what the paper is, you can always trim part of it off. What you can't do is add paper. So if for some reason you have more squares on your picture than you do on the piece of paper, you're gonna have to redo the grid on this picture. Okay, the number of squares have to match on both pieces. All right, good luck.